I must be aware that cyberspace is an older concept, and the configuration of the space I must not reduce into the era of Corona itself. But the Corona period has its own stake in the whole discussion of space. In Bangladeshi context, we did have cyberspace into play, into serious political play during 2013-14, when the social polarization, what is popularly named as secular versus Islamist debate, that came through the cyberspace actually. And that's not something is being much discussed, but the origin of those polarities came largely through cyberspace, because people did have their own agendas and agents working in different cyber platforms, and those polarities came into action when the actual people gathered due to their own reason. So my position is that the Ganojagron movement and onwards, those are the expressions of the polarities that actually had formed in the cyberspace. So the question of space is not a new thing. The question of cyberspace and the reconfiguration of the space is an ongoing project, but Corona era has its own sharing in the whole episode. Saying so, what are the immediate effect that Corona period is doing towards the middle class professionals? First and foremost, the reconceptualization of the working space, that is another area that I wish to talk in some other episode. But the point is that the whole question of space is coming towards a new meaning. For example, the population we are concerned about, they are on discussion on many topics administered by the television channels or the internet channels, or being arranged by themselves. So mostly we are talking about the space that is being public, a very private space that is being broadcast, and that's a new phenomena. Unlike what we have found in the pre-corona episode. For example, you do have your own YouTube channel, you might have your Facebook Live and all these things, but in this period, these practices are becoming kind of a norm, and everybody from their own background. In the previous period, it might get felt kind of a once-off practices. For example, people who do like to get live with their discussions or with their performances, that had different meanings. But in this period, actually this kind of communication, or rather this kind of platforms, are becoming norm, and the television, for example, television channels are promoting this kind of setting, because this is the only option left for most of them. So the overall lockdown situation across the borders, again, it is playing kind of a avenue to transform a drawing room into a studio, a broadcasting studio. And unlike the previous era, it has its own logic, it has its own reasons to come forward as a broadcasting space. So what actually it's going to cause towards the intellectual world and the performances world. I know about the people who are already concerned about the future of performing arts, and I am not coming from that background, and I am not still concerned about the future of performing arts. And this is not something we can be concerned about, because, for example, when computer interventions came, and most of the southern fine art departments, fine art faculties, they were not at all comfortable with the new kind of interventions, and still now, except a very few departments or disciplines, they are not still accepting the new technology intervention, call it new media. So the age of new media, is like 2-3 decades, but the southern institutions are still not accepting new media as a form of art media or art interface. So we do have different institutional setups to accept or reject, to discard or promote new technological devices, new technological interfaces. So that is one concern, that a new space is not being received by the older institution, and that is a common phenomena in the southern academics and institutions, and in political institutions as well. But I am not expressing that concern if a new interface is being accepted. What I am concerned is the conceptualization of the space as a form of not living a space but a broadcasting space has its own characteristics to understand. This is a new cultural studies scenario from a very academic point of view. Once again, if we define the space as a broadcasting space, then the first and foremost outcome of the change is that you are proposing a space to be interactive, so there are meanings underlying that space. So the broadcaster herself is becoming the producer of new meanings, and that's not again as something new that I am proposing, but I am meaning the Corona episode actually providing more excuses to that kind of broadcasting. Saying so, I am not, of course, against the arbitrariness and the fluidity of the broadcasting avenues as a form of news, as a form of cultural meanings. But what I am concerned of is that the change will bring newer meaning on a serious effect, and the overall audience, that the global audience. One aspect is that whenever broadcasting avenues are becoming larger, then actually consuming news or consuming meanings or consuming performance are at stake. That's for sure, and that's the crisis that the post-structuralism defined long back. But the new era of Corona, as it is going for long, it's already for months, and people are anticipating it's going for year even. So the new arrangement of space, new intervention in the private space that is becoming public with newer meaning of the words and cultural performance. So we are going to face a new kind of meanings, and in the end, perhaps the new kind of meaninglessness in the era, in the arena of cultural and intellectual practices.